Welcome to episode 204 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Martin Gooch. He was one of the first podcast guests I had on the show probably almost 4 years ago. It's episode number 17. I will link to it in the show notes. Have a listen to it if you can, as that episode really digs into the early days of Martin's career. But today I'm talking with Martin about his latest horror film called The Gatehouse, so stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 204. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Martin Gooch. Here is the interview. Welcome back, Martin, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be back. Who knew this would happen?
Yeah, exactly. As you were one of the original interviews that I did, episode number 17. So I will refer people back to that. That was a great interview. We talked a lot about your background, so I'm just going to link to that in the show notes. We won't dig into your background so much in this interview, but I would definitely refer people to episode 17 if they kind of want to know more about sort of your origin stories. So let's dig into your latest film, The Gatehouse. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or logline for the film. Just kind of tell us what it's all about.
Okay, so just out of interest, the original podcast is number 17. What number is this?
Gee, I record them usually 2 or 3 weeks before, but this will probably be like number 203, 204, 205. I'm well past 200 episodes now. So
wow, that's fantastic, fantastic.
So it's been, exactly the E high five. So
cool. Okay, so The Gatehouse. When I originally pitched this, my pitch went almost exactly like this. I said, "Have you seen Pan's Labyrinth?"
I have not.
And they said, "Oh, well, you're supposed to say yes."
Yes.
Okay, so it's like Pan's Labyrinth, only without the labyrinth or Pan.
Okay, so I'm not sure what I haven't seen Pan's Labyrinth, and I don't know what Pan's Labyrinth would be without the pan or the labyrinth.
So and they gave me the money, so that worked. It's amazing how short a pitch can actually be, but there you go. So The Gatehouse, it's a gothic horror, a fantastical fable, if you will. It's all about a little girl called Eternity, who's 10 years old, who lives in a haunted gatehouse at the edge of an ancient wood, and she likes to go and dig for buried treasure in the forest. But one day she digs up something she shouldn't, and the forest want it back.
Okay, perfect. So where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of the story?
Well, I mean, as all the filmmakers listening to this know, it's very difficult to get a film going because you've got to have ideas and then you've got to have money, all sorts of things. So what happened was my parents live in a very small village in Somerset, which is the west of England. It's a very ancient part of England. Some of the woodland there has been woodland since before the Romans got there, so it's unspoilt woodland. It's 2,000 years old in places. To get there, you have to go past Stonehenge, which obviously people know about, and that's 5,000 years old. So it's very, very, very ancient woodland. And near my parents' house is this little 17th century hunting lodge. And in the old days, because there would be just forests everywhere, you would go off hunting for a deer, and you'd hunt and you'd hunt, and you need to stop and have a cup of tea, eat something, and then carry on. So they used to build these little lodges in places, if you were very wealthy, where you could just stop, warm up, and eat, and that's still there. And I drove past it 1,000 times, and then one day I drove past it It's very beautiful, very strange structure. And there's a young woman outside putting up laundry, and all the trees had been cut back and the grass had been trimmed. And I stopped the car and I said, hello. And I said, I love your house. It's amazing. And she said, oh, we've just moved in, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'm a filmmaker. I'd love to see it. And she said, oh, come in. I love films. So I had a look round and I said, look, if I write a film that fits your house, can we come and film here? And she said, oh, yes, that would be amazing. So cut to 4 months later, we turned up with a film crew and shot the film.
Huh. Wow. That's a great story. No problem. She didn't backtread or anything. And literally the whole movie could be shot on her property, on her house.
We shot for 14 days in and around the house, like in the garden and stuff. And there's a big section of woodland behind it, a big triangle of woods, where we shot a lot of the film. From throughout the whole film got shot in that one little bit of woods. And then there's a couple of other scenes. We go to the little girl's school and a library, and there's a couple of other bits, but they're all mostly shot within 10 minutes drive by car of the Gatehouse.
Okay.
So it's 90% of it's shot in Somerset.
Okay, perfect. And I think actually this is when I start talking about the writing process, and I think this is actually a good segue into that. So it sounds like it took you 4 months to write the script, from the time you met this lady, from the time you go in, and well, actually it probably was a lot less than 4 months if you were shooting in 4 months. So maybe we can talk about that writing process of this specific script. How long did it take you to actually write the script?
I think, you see, these things, they're kind of amorphous. You sort of think about it. You think, okay, because you've got to sort of say, okay, I'm going to write another film. You have to make that decision. And then you've got to clear your brain a bit, because usually there's 1,000 different stories going on and you've got to focus on one. So you sort of, I always start making notes. I just make notes on bits of paper, and then once I've worked out the story, which may only be a page of A4, paper, then I'll write that up, and then I'll write the whole story out about 3 pages, just in actions, like what happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, blah, blah, blah. It won't make any sense to anyone other than me. Like if I handed it over to someone to read, they'll say, you're an idiot. This doesn't make any sense. And then I'll start to write it. So that the formative process probably takes a couple of months, but when I actually sat down to write it, it took 4 weeks.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
So, yeah.
Now you just said there's the first thing, you had this one page where you worked out the story. Are you concentrating mostly on sort of story and structure, or is a lot of the working out the story like getting to know the characters? Where do you kind of fall? Is it character before story or story before character? Like, what is that first page look like? What's actually in that one first page that you created?
Well, I could actually open up the document and have a look to remind me. But I mean, I did my master's degree, and I in screenwriting, and I specialised in structure. So I'm not writing a book, I'm not writing a comic, I'm not writing a magazine, I'm writing a script, and I do believe in structure very much. I'm not saying it has to hit certain pages, and I'm a big believer in the Save the Cat book. I have that just over there. And I look at that a lot. It's a very entertaining read and keeps you inspired. But your film has 3 acts, whether you like it or not. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And even people who say, "Oh, the 3-act structure is dead," well, it isn't, because your film has a beginning, it has an end, and it has the bit in between. So there's your 3 acts. And where those act breaks happen, that's up to you. If you want to follow classic Hollywood, it's about a quarter, and then a quarter to the middle, and then another quarter to the end of the second act, and then another quarter approximately. That's how Hollywood does it, and that's how most successful films do it. So if you want to follow that, you've got to break your page into 4 and work out what the inciting incident is, what's happening, what do these people want, and how's it going to end. And I quite often find, I've written a lot of screenplays now. We've just finished filming my 4th film as a director, which is my 5th film as a writer, but my 21st script as a screenwriter. And quite often I find I work out the ending first. I know how it's going to end, or who's going to be standing, and then I'll backtrack but for example, the film we just finished a film shooting it in America, and that all happened because I was in Santa Barbara at the film festival in February, and there was a huge storm, and the next morning I went outside and there was just destruction everywhere, and that whole moment just inspired me, and I sat down on the pier and I wrote most of the film story in one go. It all just came out straight away. So it's a very random process, but those points on the first page will be: who are the characters, like whose story is it, what do these people want, and what is stopping them getting it, like who's the bad guy, or what is the thing that is stopping them getting the thing they want. And that is, principally 90% of most films is there's a person who wants something and they can't get it. Get it.
So let's talk about these. It sounds like you got 2 months where you're just sort of outlining and thinking about the story, 1 month of actually writing the script. What do your days look like during that time? Are you also working on other projects? Are you in post-production on another film? So you spend half your day working on that, post on that, or just what do those actual days look like? Do you just do 12 hours? Do you do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night? What do the actual days look like when you're writing?
Well, I mean, I throughout my life, I've found I've never been able to write anything in the morning. I'm completely useless if you gave me something to write in the morning. I just can't do it. It's pointless. And also, I have a company raising money to make films, and that takes a lot of admin. And then the other films I've made still need looking after, and then there's all the other things I do, because every now and then I get hired to go out and direct stuff. So there's a lot of strands of my life that need looking after, and also I find I write best in the evening, because after about 6 o'clock the phone stops ringing. No one bothers me. That any emails that need to be done can be left until tomorrow, because everyone's gone home. So suddenly there's a sort of element of freedom after about 6 p.m. But of course that's when I want to see my girlfriend and have dinner and do stuff and watch TV. So invariably I find I never start writing until about 8 or 9 p.m. and then I'll just write, and I write until I run out of stuff to write. So it's not unheard of that I'll write all night long and go to bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is a terrible idea, because then I wake up at 8 having had 3 hours sleep and feel terrible. But when I write, I'll just sit there until I've run out of stuff to say. So if I might just write 200 words, or I might write 20 pages, but if I get stuck, I just start writing something else. So I often find that I have to have 2 or 3 scripts at once, and if I get stuck on script A, I'll just go straight to script B, and if I get stuck on B, I'll go to C. And I've got a novel that that's now finished, but when I was working on that was quite good to go to, because you're writing in a totally different style.
Now, with that strategy, that would worry me in the sense that you would get into this circle of never finishing anything, of always kind of working on different things. Something like this, obviously, at some point you said, this, I've got to just get this over the finish line. There's got to be moments where you don't have anything to write, or you can't think of anything, but you've got to just push through it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I set myself deadlines, so I just say, I'll have the first draft finished by my birthday, or by Christmas, or by Easter, or by Friday the 13th, or whatever. And then I'm someone who hits deadlines. I've always hit deadlines in whatever I'm doing. They've got to be realistic deadlines. You can't say I'm going to write 60 pages before tomorrow afternoon, because that's not going to happen. But if you say I'm going to write 60 pages before the end of next month, that is possible. I mean, I wrote a feature film once in 11 days, and I'm not saying it was any good, but the sheer fact that you've got to write and type the keys, and a screenplay is about 25,000 to 30,000 words on average, if it's like 84 to 90 pages. So just forget whether the script's any good. You need a physical amount of time to actually press those keys and do everything. So if you work out how long it takes you to physically do it, then you can break it down and you can say, right, I'm going to write 2 pages a day every day. But then all that means is that you end up with your 84-page script. There's no guarantee it's going to be any good. And one of the things that always amazes me is people say, oh, I've only got 5 pages left and then I've finished my script. And I say, No, because writing is rewriting. All you've got is your first draft. All you've got is your big chunk of marble sitting on the desk in your sculptor's room. You've just got the marble now. Now you've got to chip away at it and get the actual the story is deep within the marble, you know. And like I say, one of the things I always said to my script students is, you know, free diving, when you learn how to dive without an aqualung and you just dive under the water. The first time you dive, you can only go a couple of feet, and then you have to come up for water. And after you've been free diving for years, you can go all the way down to the seabed and look for buried treasure and oysters and pearls and stuff, and then come up. And writing is the same. Your story is right down there in your subconscious, a long, long way from the world you're sitting in right now. And if you only just spend 5 minutes and then check your email, 5 minutes and check Twitter, 5 minutes and check Facebook, you'll never ever get to where the story is, because it's right down there at the bottom. So you have to, when I write, I turn off Wi-Fi, I don't look at Facebook, I don't look at the internet. I tend to go for a lot of walks, so I'm completely on my own, so I can just think things through without being bothered. And that's where you find stories. That's why when people go to writers' retreats are in the middle of nowhere. You don't have writers' retreats in the middle of Soho in London, because you wouldn't get anything done, because every 5 minutes a police siren goes past or someone shouts or something, and you're brought back up to the surface of the water, and you'll never find the buried treasure, which is deep in your subconscious. And I think that when I need to hit a deadline, I lock myself away. When I wrote that script that was done in 11 days, basically every morning I'd get up, I'd go into my office, I'd turn everything off, and I'd just sit there and write. And I got it all done, you know, and I got paid, which is a nice thing. But to get a script so you're happy with it, I think it's very unlikely it's ever going to be in the first draft. I think it's going to be in a later draft. And I strongly believe in script editors. If you have a really good script editor, it's great, because then you can argue, you can have a conversation. And the last 3 films I've done, actually more than that, in fact, a couple of the films that haven't been shot but have been written, I work with one particular script editor, and she's very good, and she has a slightly different point of view from me, and she's not afraid to tell me that things work or they don't work. And you know, I'll say, well, it doesn't work, but blah 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 blah, and then she'll realise that maybe it does work, or maybe it is even worse than I thought it was, and it needs fixing. But to be able to have that dialogue is very important. I don't believe that people sit down and write page 1, and when they get to page 90, the script is done. I met one writer who's very well known, who shall remain nameless, who told me he just sat down and wrote the scripts like that. And I thought, that's amazing. How brilliant he must be. And then a few years later, I met the director who directed the film, and he laughed and he said it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, that's a good story, and hopefully people are really listening to that. So let's talk about that. It's a good segue into what your development process looks like. So do you finish? So this editor what is her background? Is she a producer? Is she someone who has studied screenwriting? Who is this editor?
Oh yeah. She's very well qualified. She writes TV, drama, but a deep level of understanding of what makes a good script. Mm-hmm. So you can argue at a higher level, rather than just someone just saying, "Oh, that's rubbish." Mm-hmm. She'll say, "This is rubbish, but this is why it's rubbish, and this is how it cannot be rubbish."
Mm-hmm. So then, how does the relationship work? Do you give her pages as you complete them? Do you write an entire draft and then send her the full draft? What does that actually look like?
Oh yeah, no, I send her a full draft. I'll send her. I don't know if I send her the first draft, but like the first draft is always, they call it the vomit draft. Mm-hmm. It's just getting everything out of your head and onto paper. So I'll send her the not vomit draft. So the vomit draft plus a little bit of polishing. So call that the first draft. For 1A, call it 1A, and then she'll give me proper notes, maybe as much as 10 pages of notes, very general, broad brushstrokes. Tone. I mean, we talk about tone a lot because that's very, very important to get the tone right. We struggled with the tone on the Gatehouse. There was actually an entire subplot. We filmed it. It's in the script, and we actually filmed it all. And then in the edit, the film was overrunning a little bit because I wanted it to be about 90 minutes because that helps sell the film. And I don't know what, but it was running, I don't know, really long, like maybe 1 hour, 120 or something like that. So it's just too long. And I looked at it and I was shaving away.
2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, 120 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 hours. Yeah, I see.
So it was running over long. And I was going through it and shaving off a frame here and a frame there, and it wasn't making any difference. And then I just realized that this whole section, this whole subplot was unnecessary. It didn't add to the film. It was very nicely filmed, and we had a wonderful actress in it, and she did a brilliant performance. And this was comprised of about 5 or 6 scenes, and I sort of cut away one scene, and it was running better, and then I cut away another scene and it was running better, and I cut away the other one, and I didn't want to lose this scene with the actress in because it's a really beautiful scene, and we'd had great fun filming it and blah blah blah. And then in the end it just had to go because it didn't it's all on the DVD extras, but it didn't help the film. And I should have identified that in the script, but sometimes things just seem different until you see them, and then once you're in the edit, the actual edit, the picture edit rather than the script edit, things become apparent that weren't necessarily apparent at script stage.
Yeah. So let's talk about some genre requirements. And I think it's interesting what you just said. You know, you wanted to get this movie down to about 90 minutes because it would help sell the film. Are there some other sort of, horror conventions that you also sort of had to adhere to? And I'm curious, even going into the script or even writing the script, are you aware of that stuff, trying to keep it at 90 pages? But really any genre requirements, I'd be curious just to hear kind of what some of these are and what are some of the things you're thinking about.
Well, I had a meeting with a sales agent today, just before I came to talk to you. And we talked about exactly the same things about, genre expectation from the audience and genre requirements from the sales agent. And you can make a film that does really well on the festivals and everyone loves it, but they won't sell it unless it hits a very specific niche. And there's two sides to this argument. There's the director and the auteur and the artist side who just say, look, we need to make great films and the audience will come to them. But the problem is that the people selling the films are not filmmakers. They are people who want to make money from selling films. And if it's a difficult sell, they just won't bother unless you're Quentin Tarantino or Steven Spielberg. If you're a no-name filmmaker, like most of us, struggling to, make films, they're only going to sell it if it's obvious. And if you look at the films, the independent films that do well, they are all obvious stories. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they're never complicated. The only complicated films come through art house distributors or well-known directors, or they're backed by someone like, I don't know, Canal Plus or BFI. And some of those films are wonderful. And every now and then you get a breakout film like The Lobster, for example, which is not horror, but that's where the vision of the auteur is found. But if you're trying to make low-budget horror, you have to tick the boxes of the sales agent, or they just won't sell it. Yeah. Or what they'll do is they'll package it with a horrible poster that you really, really hate, and then they'll sell that pretending it's something else.
Yeah. And so what are some of those check boxes? It sounds like the 90-minute length is one of them. What are some of those other check boxes for horror?
It's got to be well shot. It's got to be reasonably well acted. They would really love you to have someone famous in it, but 90 minutes, proper monster, 3-act structure, just easy sell, because no one's going to try hard if they don't think there's going to be a lot of money. Yeah. So, as I was just saying, it's got to be an easy sell. It's got to tick the box. It's got to fit the genre, because horror obviously has several genres. You have slasher film, you have found footage films, you have supernatural films, which is really the area we're going into with the Gatehouse. You've got gothic fantasy, which is more like Crimson, the Guillermo del Toro films, and then you have classic things like werewolf and vampire and things like that. So the horror has its own subgenres. So you've got to think, which one are you? And we're gothic horror and fantasy horror.
Okay, perfect. So now you're done with the script, and let's talk about this. And you just mentioned that you had a company that the whole point of the company was to raise money for movies. And in fact, you even mentioned this, almost 4 years ago, when it sounded like you were just starting that up. So it sounds like you've got that up and running and it's working. Maybe you can talk about the process, and we can even be specific to the Gatehouse, exactly how you raised the money and who you pitched and that whole process.
Sure. I mean, it's like there's many people out there who want to be writers and directors, but there's far less people out there who want to be producers. And the thing is, if you look at Hollywood are actually just doing exactly what we're doing, but on a smaller scale. Or we could say, turn that around and say that we're doing exactly what Hollywood's doing on a smaller scale. I mean, they're doing it on a bigger scale. So if Tom Cruise, for example, wants to make a film, he looks to his team and he says, find me a film that's science fiction, and they'll give him a whole load of scripts. Or they'll tell him and they'll say, this one's really good, it's called Oblivion, blah, blah, blah. And he'll go, that's great. And he'll buy the option to the rights, and he'll give them a little bit of money to set up the studio, set up the office, and get the ball rolling. So he'll get an executive producer credit. He'll give them however much money, probably it's in the millions, obviously. And that's how they make a film. We're doing exactly the same thing, but on a much, much, much smaller scale. I want to make a film. It's difficult to find scripts, and everyone will scream when I say that. But honestly, for every 10 scripts I get sent, one of them is shootable. All the others are completely unshootable, because people tend to write films that are more expensive to shoot than the budget that we have to shoot. And, I understand that people want to make huge fantasy films and to rival Lord of the Rings, but we can't. It's impossible to do that unless you've got $100 million. You just can't do it. And someone sent me a script which is really fantastic about diving, and I'd love to do it, but it's all about diving. So you've got to have divers, and you've got to have a swimming pool, and you've got to have the ocean, you've got to have boats, and you've got to probably go to the Caribbean and shoot it. And even before I'd got through about half of the script, I thought, this is a £10 million film. There's no way I can raise this much money. And the writer was very angry with me, because they said, you can just go and shoot it. You can go and shoot it down in the River Thames. And I was just like, no, we just can't. It's just not possible. And there seems to be this lack of understanding from writers that stuff costs money. If you have a big shootout scene with 20 people all firing guns, everyone getting shot to bits, you can't shoot that in an hour. It's going to take days to shoot that, because you've got to be careful and no one can get hurt. And are you going to have blank firing guns or real guns which don't have any ammo, or are you going to do all your guns in post-production with muzzle flashes? And if so, how you got to get the recoil to look right so they don't all look like they're kids. So suddenly this one page of action in someone's script which says, and 20 people have a gunfight and they all get killed, unless you do it in a comedic style, it's going to take a while to shoot. And and I often find that we make the films we make because we have a budget. We know that we can only raise X amount of money to make the film, so we have to be sure that the script is doable. As soon as you write in the script and Clint Eastwood walks through the door, you suddenly know that you've suddenly got to find $5 million for Clint Eastwood's appearance fee, which you may not have. So you don't have Clint Eastwood in your film.
Yeah. So maybe you can just backtrack a little bit. So what is the key to raising the money that you did raise for this film?
Well, this was a bit of a strange one, actually, because I wanted to make the film, and I'd met the owner of the house, and I'd started to write the script, and I'd written about 90% of the script. And a mutual friend of mine who is a composer, he said, you need to meet this producer because they have done a couple of successful low-budget films. So we met up, and we got on very well. We had a good laugh. And they said, have you got anything that you can do for a small amount of money? And I said, yes, actually, I'm writing it right now. She said, I'll read it. So she read it, and she said, yeah, we can do it. Can you do it for this much money? And I said, yes, it's going to be tight, but we can do it for that much money. And she went off, and we were very lucky on this occasion. We found an investor pretty fast who wanted to put his money in. So that was that. Okay. And it's outside of. I said I set up the company to raise money, so it's outside of that particular circle of finance. And it was a you know, it's so funny, isn't it? You know, you spend hours and hours or days and days, years and years looking in one direction, and then the money comes from another direction totally.
Yeah, the irony of life.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so now you've got the money, you've filmed the film. What was your steps to getting distribution? Did you go to the film festivals with this one? Did you have a distribution lined up? Some of the distributors you've worked with before?
Well, to be honest, the distributors we had on the previous two films, we weren't overly excited about, so we decided to go further afield. But we did very well on the festival circuit for the Gatehouse. I mean, it's a small budget film, and we premiered at Raindance last October, and we completely sold out the screening, and we sold it out so much that they booked another screening, and we sold that out as well. So it was a really lovely start to the festival run, and then we got some nice reviews, and we went on to the London Sci-Fi Festival in May, and then we started picking up some awards, and we won Best Horror Film at the London Independent Film Award. We went to a few festivals. We played in Helsinki, and we played in Italy, and we played all over North America, USA, and we won in a few festivals. We're playing at the Buffalo Dreams International Film Festival this weekend, I believe, which is the 12th of whatever month it is, November. So I don't even know what month it is anymore. I've got no clue where I am, who I am, or what's going on. Yeah, and we had a good festival run. I think, you know, if you can get a year of festival screenings and pick up some proper decent awards, that's a really good run for a film of this size.
And so then, did you meet a distributor during that process at the festivals, or were you querying the distributors as you were picking up some awards and getting these festivals?
We were doing both. We were doing both, and we ended up with 3 offers from 3 different distributors, which were very nice. We actually got 4 offers in the end, but 3 at the same time, and then 1 came in at the end. And we went with a company called Uncorked, who are quite well known in North America, and the American distribution, I believe, is the 4th of December this year, 2017, and then it'll be coming out in DVD in North America next year.
Perfect.
Sometime in early 2018, and we're just working out the UK distribution at the moment.
Okay, perfect. I'm curious, and I'm going through, and you can see my poster back here for my low budget feature. I'm literally going through the process now of submitting to film festivals, and I'd be curious to get your approach to that. I mean, obviously you've been doing it for a while, so you kind of probably have some idea about what festivals are good. But I'm like doing the typical stuff where I Google, you know, top, because mine's like sort of a crime thriller. So I'm Googling like top, you know, thriller film festivals, and, you know, Movie Maker magazine had a list of top, you know, thriller, and then I'm on Film Freeway trying to cross-reference them and find them and submit to them. What does your process look like for finding festivals and being able to tell? I think there's I actually think this is a big problem, and it's something missing in the marketplace. Like Film Freeway has these reviews of the festivals, but I've never seen a negative review, and so I wonder, like, I'm looking at some of these festivals and thinking, are these even really worth entering? And it's very difficult to tell. But maybe you can talk about your process of how you find festivals, and maybe even recommend a couple of good festivals, even some of the ones that maybe we haven't heard of, that you think are good.
Yeah, sure, totally. I mean, I've been going to film festivals for a long time, like 25 years. I mean, I love making films. I like meeting filmmakers. I like talking about films with some beer and seeing films. You know, I think there's nothing more fun, to be quite honest. I like meeting actors and meeting crew and talking about movies. So you've got to be very realistic about what you want from a film festival. I mean, I've been to the Cannes Film Festival 15 times. That's 15 years over the last 17 years or 18 years. And I remember, I've told this story before, but I remember very specifically at one year at Cannes, I was walking back to my accommodation, and I just felt very, very sad. I felt really, really sad and miserable and down in the dumps. And I thought, this is ridiculous. You're in Cannes. It's the south of France. There's beautiful weather. There's beautiful food. There's free wine. I don't drink wine, but there's still free wine. And there's beautiful people. There's the beach. Everything's fantastic. There's films. There's stuff to do. Even, but why was I feeling so fed up? And the reason was I had such high expectations that I was going to go to Cannes. I was going to sell a movie, make some money, blah blah blah, etc. And of course, that happens to 0.0001% of people. I mean, I sold a screenplay in Cannes once for money, but that is now 10 years ago. So you've got to have your expectations. But there's a festival. They used to have a festival in Denmark called Born Shorts, which was a Danish festival for short films, and I went there 7 years in a row, and it was a tiny festival and 300 people would turn up, and it was the most fun I'd ever had. It was fantastic. It was on a beautiful little island by the coast. They'd have all sorts of strange events and singing and dancing and watching films, and I met people there who are now my friends for life. So you can go to the biggest film festival in the whole world and have a thoroughly miserable time because your expectation is too great, and you can go to the tiniest festival in the world and have a wonderful time because your expectation is correct for that size festival. And I think if you're, everyone knows the analogy between film festivals and wedding cakes, the tiers of festivals. So you have the top tier is the little cake, and that'll be festivals like Cannes, obviously, Venice, Berlin, Toronto, New York Film Festival, and a few others. And then you've got your second tier and your third tier and your fourth tier. And you've got to identify where your film is. Because if you look at the Cannes Film Festival and everyone says, oh, my God, I want to get my film into the director's fortnight. Well, let's be realistic. Are there any films in Cannes that have ever done any well that are less than £3.5 million? And the answer is no, there aren't any. Are there any films that have done well at Cannes that have not had a big distributor behind them? And the answer is no, there isn't any. It's never happened. And so you've got to look at those things. And if you've made this fantastic film and you made it for £20,000 or dollars, like, it's not going to play in Cannes. You might play it in the sales area where the agents look at stuff and decide what's going to happen, but no one's going to show your film because it's Quentin Tarantino, it's Steven Spielberg, it's those boys are playing, and you have to be realistic. But if you go down to the second tier, which is maybe obviously Sundance is in the top tier. You look at Raindance, which is the British biggest independent film festival in Europe, I believe, and that's usually in the autumn. We just had it in September. Then you've got a good chance of getting in, and they will watch your film. I think they get 6,000 films a year, and they watch every single film. It's incredible, really. So you got to plan your campaign, and it's very easy to spend a ton of money. I mean, I know some people go drunk eBaying. I'll come home late and I'll get on Film Freeway and go, oh, I'd quite like to go to Madrid. Let's enter the Madrid Film Festival. And you spend £25 and then that goes. And then you think, oh, I'd quite like to go to Barcelona. That's also in Spain. Let's do that. And then before you know it, you spent £100 and then you get rejected from all of those festivals and you think, oh, bugger. That was a waste of money, wasn't it? And I think if you're playing the film festival game and you don't have connections, I mean, you got to go to the festival. The first year you go to any festival is just a reconnaissance. Just like if you're making a film, before you shoot on location, you need to go and look at the location. Where is the electricity? Is there somewhere to go to the toilet? Is it quiet? Is there a Chinese laundry next door with vehicles reversing 24/7 going beep, beep, beep? So you've got no chance of recording good sound. This is why you do recce's. And when you go to film festivals, the first year you go is a recce. You've got to meet them, find the programmer, become friends with the programmer, meet them, watch the film, see what films they like. And be aware, the festival is only 3 days, and most of them are 3 days or a week. Then they only have a certain number of slots and they're only going to take a certain number of films. So if, for example, they're going to show 50 films, which is quite a lot for a festival, then 25 of those films will come from their friends or people they know or people with lots of money who put into the film. So already you're down to 25, and then they're only going to take films that fit their genre. So if they're a horror festival, they're not going to take your happy film about a cuddly toy. So don't enter the wrong festival. And then all of a sudden you realize that they're only actually looking for 4 films. And instead of the 50 that you thought they were looking for, they're only looking for 4. So your film's got to be really, really, really perfect for their festival to get in. And that is an art unto itself. Yeah. But like I say, it all comes back to the circle of what do you want from the festival? There was a festival for a number of years called Brancage, which was in Jersey, and we went down there, and that was the most fun. It was a completely pointless film festival. Nothing ever happened, but they had the best band and the best music and the best fun. And I always look back at that festival and go, my God, that was a load of fun. That was really superb. But was it any use? No, it was absolutely no use whatsoever at all. I don't even know which of my films they showed there. I can't remember. That's how, you know. And then, of course, there's the filmmaker's worst nightmare, which is you enter a festival, you get selected for the festival, you fly halfway around the world to go to the festival, you flyer it, you poster it, you put it on Facebook, you put it on Instagram, you put it on Twitter, and you turn up for your screening and there's 2 people in the audience. And you're like, what the F am I doing here? This has cost me £1,000 and there's no one here. You know, I could have just stood on the corner of Oxford Street in London and handed out 1,000 DVDs, you know. More people would have watched it. So, but, you know, that happened to me. And the year that happened to me, we won the Best Film Award as well. So it was kind of a very, very peculiar event. The festival loved the film, but no one turned up. And also the other horrible thing is if you turn up and they're playing your film at 2:00 on a Wednesday afternoon, no one's going to turn up.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what TV shows, and this is kind of just a general question, what TV shows or movies have you watched recently that you like, and that maybe you would recommend to the viewers? Anything stand out?
Well, I mean, I'm such a terrible mainstream person. I mean, I love Game of Thrones. I just think it's the best thing ever, and I've watched. I just think it's fantastic. I really can't fault it. Every single episode is 5 stars, though some of them are more 5 stars than other 5 stars. But everyone's seen that, so let's think of something else. Last Man on Earth, the TV series Last Man on Earth. I just bought the DVD of Series 1, and I thought that was brilliant. Really, really good fun. And I think they're doing Series 4 at the moment. But I tend to watch these things on DVD at the moment. I don't know why. Yeah.
So what is next for you?
Well, we're just in post. We just finished shooting my new film, which is called Black Flowers, which is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi. Follows the adventures of a family in North America after a nuclear war as they fight for survival. And we filmed this up in Mount Shasta, North California, which is about as far North California as you can go before you end up in Oregon, about an hour south of Ashland. Okay. And that was absolutely stunning locations, incredible locations that, you know, our cinematography, even I think it's good, and I'm biased. And then we went across to Montana and filmed near Bozeman in a place called Emigrant, in a real nuclear bunker. Oh, wow. No sets, just a nuclear bunker. And we shot for 22 days in the USA, and I got back about 10 days ago into the UK. And I'm really happy with that. I think that's a wonderful film, and that should be ready for festivals and distribution at the second quarter of next year. Okay. So sometime after June.
Okay, perfect. How can people see the Gatehouse? What's the release schedule like? Is it going to turn up on Netflix and Hulu, those times? Maybe you know the dates about when it's going to start.
Well, it gets released in North America on the 4th of December this year. But, excuse me, which platforms, I'm not entirely sure yet. I'll find out. Mm-hmm. And then Netflix is a bit impenetrable because now they're making so much of their own content. They're buying up less independent stuff, which is obviously a shame, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. So we will, you know, try and get a Netflix release, which would be nice. That would be lovely. It feels a level of kudos attached if you end up on that platform, I think, these days. And then we're trying for the UK distribution, and it should be out on DVD in North America. I think they said February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Which would be nice.
Yeah, perfect. What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing and just kind of stay abreast of your various projects? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up and put in the show notes, but you can tell us that now.
Yeah, sure. On Twitter, I'm Goochoid, which is Goochoid, and I basically just put out everything we're doing on Twitter. The new film, Black Flowers Film, has its own Twitter. And on Facebook, I'm just Martin Gooch on Facebook, but Black Flowers Film has its own page on Twitter. And now we've finished shooting Black Flowers, we are actively financing the next film. And hopefully, if all goes well, we'll do 2 films next year in 2018, one at the end of the spring and then one at the end of the autumn. But that's very, very ambitious. And the best laid plans of men often fall along the wayside. Yeah. But we'll definitely shoot a film next year in the autumn, and if we can squeeze one in before, then that would be really cool.
Okay, perfect. Well, Martin, I really enjoyed talking to you again and just seeing your career progress. It sounds like you're off to the races and you've been very busy, so that's outstanding. I'm sure I'll have you on again when you get done your next film or 2.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you very much. See ya.
I just want to mention 2 things I'm doing at Selling Your Screenplay to help screenwriters find producers who are looking for material. First, I've created a monthly newsletter that will be sent directly to producers. Every member of SYS Select can submit 1 logline per newsletter. I went and emailed my large database of producers and asked them if they would like to receive this monthly newsletter of pitches. So far, I have around 400 producers who have signed up to receive it. These producers are hungry for material and happy to read scripts from new writers. So if you want to participate in this pitch newsletter and get your script into the hands of lots of producers, sign up at sellingyourscreenplay.com. I'm sorry, sign up at sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. And secondly, I've partnered with one of the premier paid screenwriting lead sites so I can syndicate their leads to SYS Select members. There are lots of great paid leads coming in each week from our partner. Recently, we've been getting 5 to 10 high-quality paid leads per week. These are producers and production companies who are actively looking to buy material or are looking to hire a screenwriter for a specific project. If you sign up for SYS Select, you'll get these leads emailed directly to you several times per week. These leads run the gamut from production companies looking for a specific type of spec script to producers looking to hire a screenwriter to write up one of their ideas or properties. Producers are looking for shorts, features, TV, and web series pilots. It's a huge array of different types of projects that these producers are looking for, and these leads are exclusive to our partner and SYS Select members. To sign up, go to sellingyourscreenplayselect.com. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing director Richard Friedman, who has been directing genre films for more than 3 decades. He just did a film called Christmas Crime Story, and we talk about that film as well as how he got his start in the business and how he's been able to keep making movies over the years. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Martin. There's a lot of great takeaways in this interview. Hopefully, you heard a number of things that really hopefully there was a number of things that struck a chord with you. It's definitely a number of things that Martin said that struck a chord with me. I get asked about screenwriting books quite often. You heard Martin talk about Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. That's a book I highly recommend if you haven't already read it. I'll link to it in the show notes. You can purchase it at Amazon. I don't think it's more than $10 or $12, so it's pretty cheap and it's easy to read. I'm a slow reader, and I think 6, 8, maybe 10 hours you can probably read through the whole thing. So it's an easy read and fairly inexpensive. Martin mentioned that he can't write in the morning. I'm the opposite. I feel like mornings are the best time for me to write, but you've got to find what works for you, and the only way you're going to do that is by doing it right in the morning, right in the afternoon, right in the evening, and then try and figure out when your most productive hours are. I love how Martin describes his attending film festivals over the years. He just goes and meets people and networks. And that's really how people learn and how you get acclimated to sort of the culture and the climate of independent filmmaking. I mean, he gets to see, by going to these festivals, he gets to see the other films at the festivals. He gets to meet the other filmmakers. And no matter where you live in the world, there is probably a film festival or two or maybe three within driving distance of you. And this is a great way to get out there and meet people and see other people's work. You can listen to podcasts, you can read blog posts, and obviously I'm a big proponent of that because I run a blog and a podcast. But actually meeting people in person is really a different experience, and I really think it's worth the effort. It's worth making the effort to try and do that. And again, these film festivals, especially the small film festivals, they're very, it's very down to earth. The filmmakers are just intermingling with the people attending the festivals. So all the filmmakers that are there are very accessible. You can go up, you can just talk to them, say, hey, I really liked your film. What else are you working on? You can just get to know these people. And I've been to the film festivals on sort of the opposite end of the spectrum where I've had a film. And it's nice when people come up, they've seen the film, they come up and talk to you. So it's a very easy atmosphere. People are there to have a good time, to enjoy film, to celebrate film. So again, if you can get to a film festival cheaply and easily, I just really can't recommend it enough. But I want to spend a minute on what Martin said about genre and being able to sell a film, that it must check certain boxes for a distributor to think he can sell it. And this is really important. I mean, you've got to understand who these distributors are. And I just couldn't agree more with what Martin said about, there are certain directors, a Martin Scorsese or a Quentin Tarantino. There are certain sort of auteurs that, they can make the films that they want to make, and they get the best cast, and, they get the best producers, and they get the best writers, and they get the best distribution. And those films, they're sort of a known entity. It's exactly what Martin said. For the smaller films, it's very, very difficult to make those things work. And you hear about them. You hear about these Sundance films. They are these sort of artsy films. They go to someplace like Sundance, they break out, they make money. The filmmaker, goes on to great success. And, we think that because we hear about these very unique stories, we think that that's kind of how it happens. But I'm really more in Martin's camp here, is that for these low budget genre films, you've got to think about who's going to be ultimately distributing them, who's ultimately going to be watching them. And the distributors, they don't have huge budgets. You don't have a pedigree, or perhaps you do, but if you don't have a pedigree as a director or a writer or a producer or an actor, if you don't have that kind of a pedigree, it's going to be difficult to market these films. And the distributors will understand that. And even if the film is good, it's going to be tough for a distributor to go out and sell a film that doesn't fall into kind of a clear genre format. Now, I followed up my question with another question to him, like, what are some of these specific things? And he mentioned a bunch of things that are specific to genre. And, he is making these genre films, so he's well versed in it. But that to me is the real takeaway. It's not the specific things that Martin's saying, well, do this and do that. It's understanding. It's like, he really understands the genre, the subgenres within this genre. He understands what these distributors are looking for. But this is a moving target. So you're listening to this podcast now. I'm recording it here in late 2007. You might be listening to it in 2018, 2019. These things are constantly changing and evolving. And the real way you understand these things is the way Martin has done it, by watching these films, by being invested in that genre and that subgenre and understanding. That's how you're going to learn about these things. I mean, as I said, these things are moving targets. They're evolving. They're changing. And as an artist and a creative person, you want to understand sort of these genre checkboxes, but you also maybe want to push them a little bit and be creative and maybe turn them on their head a little bit, or even just give them a slight tweak or twist. But in order to do that and to do it successfully, you've got to really understand the genre. And the way you do that is by studying it, watching these films, reading these scripts, and then really trying to dissect what these scripts are all about. This is also another film, the Gatehouse, the film that Martin just wrote and directed, that is being distributed by Uncorked Entertainment. That's just exactly like the two films I talked about with Justin Price a couple of weeks ago on the podcast. He had done a film called The 13th Friday and The Elf. Those are also being distributed by Uncorked Entertainment. And I reached out to the owner of Uncorked Entertainment, a fellow named Keith Leopard, and I interviewed him. So I've got that episode now in the can and ready to publish. I'm going to publish that at the end of this month, at the end of December. And it's, again, really keep that on the back burner and understand, because I'm going to ask him specifically about these films, The Elf, The 13th Variety, The Gatehouse, and what interested him about those films. So just kind of keep that in the back of your minds, that hopefully this will all kind of come together and we'll get another view of this film from the distributor's angle, which I found very fascinating, and I'm excited to release that episode. As I said, that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.